Mia Parker stood outside her new house, staring up at the white shutters and pristine lawn. The gated community of Whistling Pines seemed almost too perfect, a postcard suburb with neighbors who smiled a little too widely and waved a little too enthusiastically. But after a string of bad luck, a broken engagement, a layoff, and a soured relationship with her family, this quiet neighborhood felt like the fresh start she desperately needed. "This is going to be good for me," she muttered under her breath, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she grabbed a box from the moving truck. As if on cue, a voice called out from across the street, "Need a hand with that?" Mia turned to see a man walking toward her, his smile easy and charming. He looked to be in his early 30s, with sandy brown hair, a crisp button-up shirt, and jeans that seemed just casual enough to be neighborly. "I'm fine, thanks," she said, slightly wary but polite. "Nonsense." He was already halfway to her, reaching out for the box she was holding. "I'm Elliot, by the way. I live next door." Mia hesitated, but let him take the box. "Mia, nice to meet you." For the next hour, Elliot helped her move boxes into the house, chatting away about the neighborhood. He pointed out the community pool, the clubhouse, and the walking trails that looped around the nearby lake. He even mentioned the neighborhood barbecue happening that weekend. "You should come," Elliot said as he set down a box in her living room. "It's a great way to meet everyone." "I'll think about it," Mia said, smiling politely but non-committally. She wasn't ready to dive headfirst into suburban small talk with strangers just yet. Before leaving, Elliot handed her a small plate of cookies wrapped in plastic. "A little welcome gift. My sister baked them." Mia took the plate, murmuring her thanks. As soon as the door closed behind him, she set the cookies on the counter and exhaled. Elliot seemed nice, maybe a little too nice, but she chalked it up to the charm of suburban living. Over the next few days, Mia met more of her neighbors. Each introduction followed the same pattern: warm smiles, polite questions, and unsolicited offers of help. Mrs. Callahan, an older woman from 2 doors down, brought her a casserole. The Martins, a young couple with a toddler, insisted she borrow their gardening tools if she ever needed them. Even Elliot popped by again, offering to help her set up her Wi-Fi. At first, Mia found the friendliness endearing, but as the days went on, it started to feel excessive. Conversations with her neighbors always seemed to veer into personal territory: where she worked, why she moved, whether she had family nearby. One evening, as Mia unpacked a box of books, she glanced out her window and saw Elliot standing on his porch. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, hands in his pockets, staring in the general direction of her house. When their eyes met, he smiled and waved. Mia forced a smile and waved back, but something about the moment unsettled her. She pulled the curtains shut. 2 weeks after moving in, Mia stumbled across an old, leather-bound journal while unpacking. It was tucked into a box she hadn't labeled, one she didn't even remember packing. The journal looked old, the edges of the pages worn and slightly yellowed. Curious, she flipped through it. The handwriting wasn't hers, and the entries seemed to belong to someone who had lived in the same house decades ago. They're always watching, smiling, asking questions. It's like they can't help themselves. Mia froze. The entry was dated July 12th, 1995. She skimmed through more pages. The writer described feeling trapped, like the neighbors were suffocating them with their kindness. They wrote about strange occurrences: mail disappearing, belongings moved around the house, a neighbor showing up uninvited at odd hours. I'm starting to think they know more about me than I know about myself. Mia slammed the journal shut, her heart racing. She told herself it was just the paranoia of the previous occupant, a bored suburbanite with an overactive imagination. But as she sat alone in her living room, the silence of the house pressing in on her, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. That night, Mia decided to take a walk to clear her head. The streets of Whistling Pines were eerily quiet, the street lights casting long shadows on the perfectly manicured lawns. She passed house after house, each one looking identical to the next. As she rounded a corner, she noticed a man she hadn't seen before sitting on a bench near the playground. He was dressed in a dark hoodie, his face partially obscured by the shadows. "Hey there," she called out cautiously. The man looked up, his eyes darting around nervously. "You're new here, right?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," Mia said, stepping closer. "Be careful," the man whispered. "This place isn't what it seems. The neighbors, they're not just friendly. They're—" Before he could finish, a car pulled up, its headlights slicing through the darkness. The man bolted, disappearing into the trees behind the playground. Mia stood frozen, watching as the car slowed to a stop. The driver's window rolled down, and Elliot's familiar face appeared. "Mia, what are you doing out here?" he asked, his tone light but his expression tense. I couldn't sleep," she said, glancing toward the trees. "Did you see that guy?" Elliot frowned. "What guy?" "There was someone sitting right there." She turned back to the bench, but it was empty. "I didn't see anyone," Elliot said, his voice calm but firm. "Let me walk you home. It's late." Mia hesitated, then nodded. As they walked back to her house, Elliot kept up a steady stream of chatter, but Mia's mind was elsewhere. Who was that man? What was he trying to warn her about? The next morning, Mia decided to reread the journal, but when she went to grab it from her bedside table, it was gone. She searched the entire house, but there was no sign of it. Her hands trembled as she stared at the empty spot where the journal had been. It hadn't just disappeared. Someone had taken it. Her thoughts turned to Elliot. She thought about how he always seemed to show up at just the right moment, how he'd offered to help her set up her Wi-Fi, how he'd been there last night after the strange man ran off. Mia realized she didn't feel safe anymore. Not in her house, not in Whistling Pines, and certainly not around her overly friendly neighbor. But leaving wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until she found out the truth. Mia couldn't sleep. Her house, once a refuge, now felt like an elaborate stage where unseen players moved behind the curtains. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside sent her heart racing. She locked all her doors, double-checked her windows, and sat in her dimly lit living room, gripping her phone. Should she call the police about the missing journal? About the strange man in the park? She thought better of it. What would she even say? That her overly friendly neighbors were giving her bad vibes? That a random man had warned her of something? No, the police would write her off as paranoid. But she wasn't paranoid. Someone had been in her house. Someone had taken that journal. The next morning, she decided to test her theory. Mia walked to the local coffee shop just outside Whistling Pines. It was small but cozy, and the kind of place where locals gossiped over steaming mugs of coffee. She needed to be away from the watchful eyes of the neighborhood, somewhere she could think clearly. She sat at the counter and pulled out her laptop, searching for anything about Whistling Pines' history. The results were surprisingly sparse. No scandals, no crimes, no dramatic incidents. Just bland local news and promotional articles about its tight-knit community and family-friendly atmosphere. It was as if Whistling Pines had been scrubbed clean. Feeling frustrated, Mia decided to take a different approach. She looked up her own address and found the name of the previous owner, Angela Grayson. The name seemed familiar. Digging deeper, Mia found an old newspaper article. Local woman declared missing. Angela Grayson, 38, was last seen leaving her home in Whistling Pines on June 22, 1997. Authorities suspect foul play, but no evidence has been found. Mia stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. Angela Grayson had lived in her house, and she'd vanished. The journal must have belonged to her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. Small world. Mia turned to see Elliot standing there, holding a coffee cup. His usual easygoing smile was in place, but there was something sharp in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Could ask you the same thing," Elliot said, sliding into the seat next to her. "Not many people from Whistling Pines come all the way out here for coffee." Mia forced a smile. "Just needed a change of scenery." Elliot glanced at her laptop screen, his smile faltering for a split second when he saw the article about Angela Grayson. "Looking up old neighborhood gossip?" "Just curious about the house's history," Mia said, closing her laptop. "Well, if you ever want the inside scoop, you know where to find me," Elliot said, standing up. "Oh, and don't forget, neighborhood barbecue tomorrow. You're coming, right?" "I'll think about it," Mia said. Elliot lingered for a moment before nodding and walking out. The next day, Mia decided to attend the barbecue. If Elliot and the rest of the neighbors were hiding something, she needed to act normal and blend in until she could figure out what it was. The community park was buzzing with activity. Kids ran around with balloons, tables were piled high with food, and groups of adults chatted and laughed like they were lifelong friends. Mia felt out of place, but she forced herself to smile and mingle. Elliot was the first to approach her. "Glad you made it," he said, handing her a soda. Mia thanked him and began to wander. She struck up conversations with a few neighbors, casually steering the topic toward Angela Grayson. Every time she mentioned Angela's name, the reactions were subtle but telling. An awkward pause, a change in tone, a quick excuse to leave the conversation. It was clear that Angela's disappearance wasn't something people wanted to talk about. As the evening went on, Mia noticed a pattern. Whenever she moved from one group to another, Elliot wasn't far behind. He never interrupted her conversations, but he was always within earshot, watching. By the time the barbecue wound down, Mia's nerves were frayed. She made an excuse about needing to get home early and left before the others. Back at her house, Mia locked the door and sat down to review the notes she'd scribbled during the barbecue. But before she could make sense of them, a soft knock startled her. She froze. It was nearly midnight. Who would come to her house at this hour? Peeking through the peephole, she saw the man from the playground, the one who'd warned her about the neighborhood. He looked even more disheveled now, his hoodie pulled low over his face. Mia hesitated, then cracked the door open. "Don't say anything," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "Just listen. They're watching you. They're always watching." "Who's watching?" Mia asked. "All of them," he said. "The neighbors. They're not who they say they are. What do you mean? The man leaned in closer. They're monitoring you, tracking everything you do. You think they're being friendly, but it's all part of the act. They know things about you, things they shouldn't know. Mia's mind raced. Why? What do they want? Before the man could answer, headlights lit up the street. He tensed. I shouldn't be here. If they find out... Wait! Mia grabbed his arm. Who are you? Why are you helping me? He pulled away. I used to live here. I know what they're capable of. You need to leave before it's too late. With that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Mia standing in the doorway, her heart pounding. The next morning, Mia decided to confront Elliot. She waited until she saw him leave for his usual morning run, then slipped into his house through the unlocked back door. The inside was immaculate, almost too clean, but Mia's attention was drawn to a locked filing cabinet in his office. She pried it open with a letter opener and found what she was looking for. Files. Dozens of them. Each file contained detailed information about the residents of Whistling Pines. Photos, medical records, financial histories, things no ordinary neighbor should have access to. Mia's hands trembled as she found her own file. It contained everything: her family history, her breakup, even private journal entries she'd never shared with anyone. Before she could process what she was seeing, a voice behind her made her freeze. Looking for something? Mia turned to see Elliot standing in the doorway, his expression calm but cold. You've been spying on me, Mia said, holding up her file. On everyone. It's not what you think, Elliot said, stepping closer. Then what is it? Elliot sighed. It's for your own protection. Trust me, Mia. You're safer here than you are out there. Mia backed away. What are you talking about? Safer from what? Elliot didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the file in her hand. You don't want to do this, Mia. Just let it go. But Mia wasn't about to let anything go. Not until she uncovered the truth. Mia clutched her file to her chest, her back pressed against the wall as Elliot stepped closer. His calm demeanor had cracked, revealing something colder, more calculating. Why do you have all this? Mia demanded, her voice trembling but defiant. You've been tracking my entire life, everyone's lives. It's not what you think, Elliot repeated, his tone eerily calm. It's about protecting the community, protecting you. From what? Mia shot back. What am I supposed to be so afraid of? Elliot exhaled deeply, as though considering how much he should say. Whistling Pines is special. We've built something here that most people can't even imagine. A place where everyone is safe, where there's no crime, no chaos. But maintaining that order requires oversight. Mia's mind raced. You're spying on us, manipulating us. That's not protection. It's control. Elliot took another step forward. You don't understand. People like Angela Grayson didn't understand either. She thought she could leave, but she was wrong. Mia's blood ran cold. What happened to her? Elliot's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Mia's instincts screamed at her to run. She bolted past Elliot, clutching the file, and dashed out of the house. Behind her, she heard him call out, his voice calm but threatening. You can't leave, Mia. You'll only make this harder for yourself. Mia ignored him, sprinting back to her house. She locked the door and began throwing her belongings into a bag. Her mind was a whirlwind of panic and fury. Angela Grayson hadn't vanished. She'd been silenced. And now, Mia knew too much. As she grabbed her car keys, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. They're coming for you. Meet me at the old trailhead." Mia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the essentials and slipped out through the back door, sticking to the shadows as she made her way to the trailhead. At the trailhead, the man from the playground, Darren, was waiting for her. He looked even more ragged than before, but his eyes were sharp and focused. "You found the files, didn't you?" he asked. Mia nodded. "What is this place? What are they doing?" Darren glanced around nervously. "Whistling Pines isn't just a neighborhood. It's an experiment, a privately funded project to create the perfect community. They lure people in, monitor them, and manipulate them to fit the mold. If anyone resists, they're removed." Mia's stomach turned. "Angela Grayson?" Darren's face darkened. She tried to expose them. She got too close to the truth. They made her disappear. "And you?" Mia asked. "I used to work for them," Darren admitted. "I handled data collection, tracking residents, planting surveillance equipment. But I couldn't live with myself after what they did to Angela. I tried to leave, but they don't let anyone leave. Not really." Mia's mind raced. If what Darren was saying was true, she was in more danger than she'd realized. "How do we stop them?" "We expose them," Darren said. "I have evidence, documents, recordings. If we can get it to the right people, we can take them down." Before Mia could respond, headlights appeared in the distance. Darren grabbed her arm. "They're here! Run!" Mia and Darren sprinted into the woods, the sound of footsteps and voices close behind. They zigzagged through the trees, but it was clear their pursuers knew the terrain better. Suddenly, a figure stepped out in front of them. It was Elliot. "Enough, Mia," he said, his voice steady but cold. "This doesn't have to end badly. Come back with me, and we can fix this." "Fix this," Mia shouted. "You're controlling people's lives. You're destroying them." Elliot shook his head. "You don't see the bigger picture. Whistling Pines works because we eliminate chaos. No crime, no disorder. Everyone lives in harmony. But that only happens if people like you follow the rules." "By spying on them? By killing anyone who doesn't fall in line?" Mia shot back. Elliot's jaw tightened. "Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." Darren stepped forward, his voice trembling with anger. "Angela didn't deserve to die. None of them did." Elliot's gaze flicked to Darren. "And you didn't deserve to betray us. But here we are." Before anyone could react, Darren lunged at Elliot, and the two men struggled. Mia used the distraction to grab a fallen branch and swung it at Elliot, knocking him to the ground. "Run!" Darren yelled. Mia hesitated, but Darren pushed her away. "Go! Expose them!" Mia turned and ran, her heart pounding as she made her way back to the main road. 2 weeks later, Mia sat in a small apartment in a different city, staring at her laptop. She had managed to escape Whistling Pines, taking Darren's evidence with her. She had sent it to several journalists and law enforcement agencies, waiting for the story to break. But nothing happened. She refreshed the news sites again and again, but there was no mention of Whistling Pines, no investigation, no expose. It was as if the evidence had disappeared into thin air. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from another unknown number. "You can't win. Stop trying." Mia's blood ran cold. They were still watching her. Next day, Mia went to the grocery store. As she walked down the aisles, she felt the familiar sensation of being watched. She turned a corner and froze. Standing at the end of the aisle, smiling warmly, was Elliot. "Long time no see," he said casually, as if they were old friends running into each other. Mia dropped her basket and backed away, her heart pounding. She stumbled out of the store, glancing over her shoulder, but Elliot was gone. She got into her car and locked the doors, her mind racing. No matter where she went, no matter how far she ran, they would always find her. As she drove away, a realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Whistling Pines wasn't just a place. It was an idea, a network, and she would never truly escape. If you love this story and want to hear more thrilling tales like it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories of Brilliance. Stay tuned for more captivating stories with twists you'll never see coming. See you next time.